Hello and welcome to OEN Engage. Thank you for joining us for today's session, Best Practices for Facilitating Open Pedagogy Learning Circles. My name is Jamie Whitman, and I am the Open Educational Practices Specialist at the OEN. And today I'll be joined by David Tully from North Carolina State University and Amanda Hurford from the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana, also known as PALNI. And they will get a chance to introduce themselves to you as we continue on in our session. We kicked off the week with the OEN Land Acknowledgement and the OEN Community Norms. And if you'd like to review them, you can take a look at the links in the chat. Thank you, Tanya. And while the OEN is located at the University of Minnesota, I am coming to you from northern Baltimore County in Maryland, in which the Piscataway and the Susquehannock peoples were the original stewards of this land and were forced under extreme duress to cede this land. However, they continue to maintain a relationship with these lands today. And here in Maryland, we're fortunate that our state government, and specifically our Maryland Arts Council, has worked in formal compensated consultations with tribal leaders and elders from tribes around the state whose lands have been claimed by the state of Maryland. And the resources from our Maryland Arts Council are a really powerful place and have been a really powerful place for me to learn more about the Indigenous peoples, history, and culture of the land that I get to live, work, and play in. We welcome you to share your own local land acknowledgement in the chat if you wish to do so. Or you can visit the Native Land digital site to learn about the lands that all of our community members inhabit and dig deeper into our relationships with their heritage, the resources they share, and how we can actively be a part of a better future moving forward. This session is being recorded, so the links will be sent out and shared after the event. And if you have any questions or comments during the session, please submit them via chat and we will do our best to address them. So here is a quick overview of our agenda. I'm going to do a very brief overview of the OEN Learning Circle curriculum and resources, where to find all of that information. And then we'll have David and Amanda share their own experiences with facilitating learning circles related to open pedagogy. I think this will be a really great conversation. David's going to give us this institutional perspective from NC State, while Amanda has a consortial perspective and how to run learning circles in that setting with PALNI. And then, of course, we'll leave some time for discussion and questions. Okay, so I'm going to do just a very quick overview of the OEN Learning Circle. If you were in our last session, David presented for us on the Learning Circle, so this is going to be just a very big review of everything David just talked about, but it's just a quick little bit in case you were not there for that. So the OEN's Learning Circle is built into 7 sessions. We start with our kickoff session that really introduces folks to the learning circle structure and sort of the foundation of the community that we're trying to build around this. And of course, also defining open pedagogy. And then you'll see we move through really critical topics to open pedagogy and really important pieces for engaging with open pedagogy and thinking about our students, caring for our students, designing a course with open pedagogy, starting with accessibility and scaffolding, and universal design for learning. And then really important topics, the intersection of open with social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the OEN Learning Circle, we also have a tool every week that we're working with, tools that are open and are popular tools for working with open pedagogy like Hypothesis, Google products, Padlet. And so we also do a tool showcase where we talk about some more tools that are maybe off the beaten path a little bit. And then, of course, the goal of our learning circle is to have folks actually produce something that they can use that will be helpful for their future in their classes. And so we have a show and tell session in our last session together. And we have a couple of expectations for our participants, of course. One is that they attend all 7 sessions. This is a part of the application process. So it is an agreement to attend all 7 sessions when you apply. However, in the course of the learning circle, life happens and folks may not be able to attend every session, but it is an expectation that at least you go into the learning circle expecting to attend all of our sessions together. We also have pre-work for each week. This can be readings, videos, and a tool exploration, and this gives us all the same starting point before each session so that we can engage in really robust discussions. And so we expect our participants to go through that each week before we meet. As I mentioned, we have a show and tell session. And so this is where we actually have our participants do something within the learning circle. So they're transforming a traditional assignment to a renewable assignment or creating a renewable assignment from scratch, or they're creating a digital learning object. And then, as I mentioned, show and tell, they share what they made in session 7. All right, and where can you find all of this? Everything for the OEN Learning Circle is openly licensed. So we have our Canvas course, which walks you through week by week and has the tools in there, the pre-work in there, so you can sort of follow the schedule. The curriculum, which is in a Google folder. This is all of the slide decks, which have been updated with slide notes. So for anybody who wants to adapt the curriculum, you have slide notes to get you started, and then you can adjust those and rewrite them to meet your own institution's needs or your consortial needs. It also includes email templates that you can use for your faculty, walks you through the different steps of the learning circle projects that folks will be creating as well. And then our tools documentation, which lists all of those popular tools that we go through each week, as well as additional tools that we talk about in the tools sheets. So as I said, very brief overview. The links are in the chat, so you can find all of that info if you'd like to take a look. And as I mentioned, we're going to hear from the institutional perspective and the consortial perspective. And so we have David Tully, Principal Librarian for Student Affordability at North Carolina State University, and Amanda Hurford, the Scholarly Communications Director at PALNI. So I will now hand it over to David.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And yeah, again, it's a real privilege to be here. I was lucky enough to co-host a session this morning, so it's nice to make a quick return as well, this time talking about a similar related subject as well. So if you missed today's session or you just completely forgot, my name is David Tully. I'm the Principal Librarian for Affordability at NC State University Libraries. My role is built around student success, very specifically advancing open education and ultimately helping to do what we can do as a libraries to reduce the cost of learning for students. To give you a bit more of a idea about what I do sort of day to day, I manage our student scholarships program. So we have a scholarships program for our student workers at the libraries. We distribute around $150,000 per year to our students, the majority of which is raised through private philanthropy. I support open education initiatives such as our alt textbook program, which is our OER grant program. And I lead faculty development programs such as open pedagogy development programs, and generally just collaborate with faculty to create hopefully innovative, certainly accessible, and intentionally student-centered learning experiences. My role is a little bit unusual. I work in the Open Knowledge Center, which kind of makes sense, I think, for my sort of job title. But I also have a dotted line to our libraries development department. And in that role, I build relationships with donors and foundations and do my best to connect them to the libraries in a variety of different ways to strengthen engagement, demonstrate the impact that that support has on students at NC State, even outside of our student workers, and ultimately just expand opportunities for students and grow the resources that we need to sustain and further build our programs and continue to be successful. So my experience with open pedagogy learning circles or faculty learning circles full stop began around 6 or 7 years ago when initially developing our Open Pedagogy Incubator. So to give you an idea of what the OPI is, it's a cohort program which brought together faculty from different disciplines to explore open pedagogy, and it asked them to work towards developing a renewable assignment as the program deliverable. So since 2019, we've been through like many different versions and many different cohorts of that program, including scaling it to a system level. We're one of 17 schools in the University of North Carolina system. So we now offer that program at a state level as well. So I get to team up with librarians from other schools and work with faculty from all the schools within that system as well. And I absolutely love doing that for a few of the reasons that I'll come on to talk about in the course of the next few slides. I also want to highlight the Open Pedagogy Pit Stop program, which is a relatively new program that we offer to campus. We're about to begin our next iteration of that uh, mid-September. So it's like the incubator in so much that it offers a spot to interdisciplinary faculty. But this time they're asked to develop renewable assignments using the help of interactive technologies. I still call them emerging, but my sort of more like tech focused colleagues tell me off and tell me that they're no longer emerging. So I need to use interactive. But to give you an idea as to what that is, it's things like AI, virtual reality, game-based learning, things like that. And all the faculty that take part in that, they're joining that learning circle really to develop something that engages students on a different level and hopefully, ultimately, leads to improved student learning outcomes. And finally, I'm an instructor for the OEN certificate in open pedagogy. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with this already. If not, you should get familiar with it because it's a really fantastic initiative that guides small teams, usually uh, uh, an instructor and a librarian or an ID, sometimes all three, through this like deep exploration of open pedagogy, sort of what it is, why it matters, how it can be really transformative in the classroom and for students, and then also, obviously how to apply it within their pedagogy as well. And then by the end of that program, the goal is, each of those sort of doubles or trios develop a sort of fully realized renewable assignment that's been stress tested and designed to engage students as active contributors to knowledge. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about sort of my experience, past experience with learning circles. I guess the question might be like the why learning circles in particular, why this is such a great vehicle for introducing and supporting educators through open pedagogy. Well, I'm just a really big fan of them because I've seen firsthand the effectiveness of introducing faculty to open pedagogy at the same time as introducing sort of colleagues as well and getting them working together and co-collaborating, bouncing ideas off one another, getting feedback from one another, and ultimately start to design renewable assignments with that community, that support structure in place. So in my experience, they are sort of particularly powerful in offering a space for reflection. Obviously, interesting dialogue between peers. I haven't been many part of too many cohorts been one discipline. I find that a strength of the cohort is when you can combine multiple disciplines. And really crucially, they can be just a safe space for experimentation. So trying it out in our program before you then go and apply it, among a group of students. So we're a safe space for getting started and experimenting. So this community of practice that it kind of stimulates, where ideas can be shared, feedback is garnered, and overall new possibilities that can be explored together. But they also provide this opportunity, I think, for faculty to align their pedagogy with their values, and that's often around things like student agency, equity, and also like access as well. So they should, and they're designed, in my experience, to give folks time and also space to think and reflect about how their teaching practices, um, what they want their teaching practices to be, and certainly why they want them to be that way, and certainly do it in a way that sort of reimagines teaching so that students are more active and they're contributing more and they're ultimately engaging more with their course and hopefully at the end of it leading to more successful learning outcomes as well. So with that in mind, here's a few of the things that I've learned over the years. I do have some don'ts on another slide as well, but in terms of setting up for success, this is what I've learned. The cohort size really matters. This shouldn't be overlooked. So if the group is too large, it can sometimes feel a little bit impersonal people can be less likely to share. People can get kind of like a little bit lost in the shuffle if the group is too large. And of course, it's harder to develop relationships, especially when these programs are online, and that can be like sometimes a little bit more difficult. And I've done in-person only, I've done hybrid, I've done online only as well, and each have their pluses and minuses. But one thing that they do share is that the size of the cohort shouldn't be overlooked. It's really important. And obviously, vice versa, if it's too small, then you'll lose a little bit of value in not having enough voices around. So the sweet spot is generally in the middle. So, big enough to generate rich discussion, small enough to stay connected. Scheduling, scheduling can be one of the biggest logistical challenges, and as a facilitator can certainly cause headaches. I've done this, but if you try to accommodate individual availability, it can be done. It's certainly not easy. In my experience, it can become unmanageable. A better approach that I find is to set your session dates and times in advance when you promote your program. So when anybody applies, they know going in it is going to be on these dates at this time. So transparency, I think, is really key there. And then that way participants can self-select into the experience based upon their, whether that works for them and their own sort of, bandwidth and that sort of thing as well. And I've certainly had a lot of folks over the years reach out and say, I'm not available during these times, but I'd love to take part. And, what we try to do is when we do a next version of the program, we, tweak it slightly. It's not always successful, but we obviously we repeat our program so folks aren't experiencing if I don't do it now, I'm never going to get the chance to do it. We try and be flexible around that as well. um, Speaking of flexibility, you need to be inflexible in terms of expectations right away. Be upfront about the goals of the program, be upfront about the time commitment and the expectations about what your participants are expected to produce. Don't, for instance, think that they will all know that they have to produce something by the end. You have to sort of really be very intentional about that. And then obviously this avoids confusion later on and helps ensure that everybody's on the same page. And to help that, scaffold your sessions towards a clear outcome. So whether your deliverable, your end product is a renewed assignment or a syllabus policy or an artifact, just make sure that each session builds towards that goal. Otherwise, it can feel like it's drifting. So build towards that goal, help participants stay focused, feel a sense of progress. So, to help with that, here's some do's and don'ts that I've learned, in some cases the hard way, over the last few years. When facilitating the learning circle, it's really important to begin by just clearly framing the experience. So, for instance, don't have preconceived notions that everybody already understands open pedagogy. Many will certainly be encountering it for the first time. A lot of faculty come to us because they have a teaching challenge, or they're looking to, just enhance their pedagogy. And this is a program that offers an opportunity to do that. But don't assume that they're entering into it purely because of open pedagogy. So take time to introduce the concept in a way that connects to their existing values and teaching goals. And as the program unfolds, try to balance content with active learning. Um, you know, there's a time and a place for lectures, but faculty don't just want to hear about open pedagogy, they want to just experience it. So try to avoid relying upon, or overly relying upon lectures, and, make sure that you build in that time for collaboration, discussion, and experimentation. Try to maintain momentum between sessions. So there's no hard and fast rules here that, you have to meet every week, or sort of whatever it is. You can be bi-weekly. There's a way you could do it monthly, I'm sure. But try and whatever the gaps between sessions are, try and maintain momentum. So, a quick check-in or a reminder or a reflection prompt or anything that's going to keep people engaged and thinking is useful. Um, don't wait until the end of the program to check progress or get feedback. Try and incorporate that throughout so that can actually inform how your program develops. By that same thread, try not to be too rigid to what you've built at the outset. one of the principles of open pedagogy is that the learner has some agency to try and weave that in, especially in terms of getting feedback and pivoting as need be. And again, I can't stress enough. Please keep the deliverable front and center, and don't let it become an afterthought. So on the next slide, so here are some of my sort of key takeaways. Um, these are some of the ones that come to mind immediately. I could have provided more for sure, but these are some of the ones that in my sort of list of priorities are often found towards the top. So overall, learning circles certainly are a really powerful way to engage instructors with open pedagogy, but the actual key, the secret sauce, is to connect it to and design the program around a teaching challenge that they're facing. You know, they're coming onto the lot because they're interested. Um, so try to sort of build your program around that interest and more importantly, sort of those needs. You don't have to go it alone. In fact, you shouldn't go it alone where you can avoid it. So, obviously we're at the libraries, but we also work with our partners at Delta, who are instructional designers. And we also partner with our own version of our Center for Teaching and Learning, which is our Office for Faculty Excellence. So the three of us collaborate together to actually roll out these programs. And we each bring something different, each bring something unique, and then together we just really strengthen the experience. Um, be really thoughtful about your design of the program. So things like timing. I've promoted already having a set time, for instance, and dates, but be thoughtful about it. Figure out when the majority of faculty are likely to be available. So for a lot of our programs, they run sort of Friday late mornings, for instance. That's the feedback that we got from faculty. That's when the majority of them were available. So try and incorporate things like that. Obviously, the format and just a clear alignment with the deliverable can make a big difference. Um, just remember too that peer voices are really powerful. The whole point of a faculty learning circle is that faculty have access to each other, and I think faculty probably learn best from one another. So, you know, don't just imagine that those opportunities are going to present themselves. They might, but purposely, when you design your program, make sure that you build in opportunities for sharing and storytelling and everything else, because it can really make a difference. And then finally, treat it as an evolving process. So no learning circle is ever perfect off the bat. Ours certainly haven't been, and the programs that we do today are a lot different to when we started in 2019. We've evolved, and we'll continue to evolve. I mentioned the pit stop program earlier. That's something that wouldn't have happened 5 or 6 years ago, but the way that the needs of faculty have evolved, when now that it makes more sense to do something that's a little bit different while still an incubator. And gather feedback, make sure that you reflect before rolling out the second or the third, the fourth, whatever version of your program. And overall, yeah, just continue to adapt your program to meet your faculty's needs. I think that is really key. And yeah, I think that's it for me, but certainly look forward to chatting to folks later in the Q&A.
Thanks so much, David, and I will pass it off to Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, David, and thank you, Jamie. David, I'm glad that you mentioned iteration because that's where we are with our project right now. We are ready to reflect on what we did in our pilot year and start moving towards our next iteration. So, figuring out what went well, what was a challenge, and what we want to change going forward. So, this is a really good opportunity for me to reflect on what we're doing. So my name is Amanda Hurford, and I manage the PalSave Affordable Learning Program at PALNI. And PALNI, in case you're not familiar with it, is a consortium of 24 small private institutions from all across Indiana. And in 2024, we started a pilot project to provide grants to faculty who joined our learning circle or our learning community and create an open pedagogy assignment, use it in their course, and then share it broadly. And the people who worked on this project are named on this slide at the bottom in that box. And they were a good mix of librarians and instructional designers. We wanted to make sure to have representation from both of those camps. You can go to the next slide, Jamie. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we implemented open pedagogy and why. So we wanted to explore open pedagogy for a while. We were all really intrigued by this concept, but we didn't really feel like we had what we needed. We didn't feel equipped to do so until OEN really started digging into this concept and did their introductory webinar and the Learning Circle resources. So when we finally decided to forge ahead and to offer programming in this area, we did so as a way to diversify what it is that we do at PALNI and to offer it as another kind of course redesign grant alongside our grants to encourage faculty to adopt zero-cost resources. So this is sort of another option to the course redesign grant. Oh, sorry, go back if you could, Jamie. So we wanted to build upon what we were already doing and expand into open pedagogy as a way to further develop our initiative. And we wanted to leverage all the great resources that OEN created. So we definitely didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we wanted to take advantage of everything that OEN is doing. So our task force started in the spring of 2024, and we were charged to define and develop a plan to collaboratively support open pedagogy programming. So what we did was we decided to take a little bit of a step back and do a big research project, just because that's how we are. We defined some research questions that we wanted to explore, such as what is open pedagogy? How does it work in practice? What kind of publications are out there that we can draw from? And what professional development opportunities are out there in addition to what the OEN is offering. So we came up with some deliverables, and I'll tell you about those in the next slide. Go ahead, Jamie. All right, so here is a screenshot from our Open Pedagogy webpage. This is sort of the product of our research project. We had done all this great information to fill our heads about everything we know about open pedagogy, and we wanted to share it with our community. So I can put that link in the chat if you want to check this out. It includes oh, thank you, Tanya. It includes the definition for open pedagogy, many resources, and then links out to our other deliverables. So Jamie, you can go to the next slide. So here is the big deliverable that we're super excited about. This is our press book that we created based upon the Open Education Network's Open Learning Circle curriculum and the related slide decks. We pulled all of that information into one press book, and we made that available to anyone who wants to come to our website and learn about it, including librarians and instructional designers and the participants in our learning circle. Thank you. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, and so building upon the website and the learning guide, we developed out our assignment grants and all of their associated workflows, documents, and forms, which I'm sure you can imagine. It's a lot of work to come up with all of the stuff that you need to launch a new grant program. But basically, the grant looked like this. We asked participants to asynchronously review the learning guide sort of on their own time, and then join us for a discussion in Slack. So we would provide weekly prompts, and faculty were encouraged but not required to participate in those prompts. We didn't want to be too prescriptive about how they would engage with us. And then they would submit their assignments. We would review and approve if they met the requirements, and we would then upload them to our repository and then further encourage them to add them to the Open Pedagogy portal. So we wanted to make sure there was that two-way street between what we are doing and what the OEN is doing. And then they had to show us that they implemented the assignment. There was a form in which we asked faculty to let us know what course was being used and how many students were part of the project. And finally, we asked them to send out a student perception survey and complete their own evaluation survey of how it went. And one last note I wanted to mention was we did encourage faculty to also apply to the OEN Learning Circle as well if they wanted more of an immersive synchronous experience than what it was that we were offering. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Jamie. So here is our repository of activities that we added the assignments to as they were completed. Thank you again, Tanya. So on the left is the page, and on the right is just a few examples of some of the assignments that were added. So you can see that there was really a large range of subjects and disciplines, and all of these are Creative Commons licensed. So if your faculty might be interested in checking out how others did this or implementing these assignments for themselves, they are available to you. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, Jamie. So how did it go? So we can safely say that this was a successful pilot. We're really excited to report that. Most of our participants completed. We had 28 applicants enrolled and 21 of them finished all of the deliverables. Faculty reported that the learning guide was super valuable, but surprisingly that the Slack channel, the discussion space, was less so. We did note that discussion participation was low, so this is something that we're kind of evaluating going forward. Oh, thank you. And a lot of faculty reported that their students had greater engagement with open pedagogy assignments when compared to traditional or disposable ones. And students reported that their overall experience was super positive, that it made a positive difference on their learning of the material, and that they were overall satisfied with how the teaching method was rolled out. You can go to the next slide. So successes, we wanted to kind of celebrate some of the good things that happened. So we asked some open-ended questions of our faculty and our students about what they liked best about this process. And the responses fell into these broad categories. I won't go into all of them super deeply, but just sort of overall, faculty really liked the impact that this process had on their students, and they enjoyed learning about reusable assignments in a collaborative environment. So kind of like David was saying, they really did like the opportunity to interact with librarians and instructional designers and other peers in this collaborative learning space. And let's see, students really enjoyed the ability to try a new approach at learning where they could be creative, have agency, and build confidence with assignments that had real world applications. So that was all really good news. And then some things that our task force noted, we liked that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel, and we used that OEN content, and it was just a really cool opportunity to connect with faculty. And so for challenges, so these won't be a surprise, I don't think. If you could go back one slide, Jamie. So they noted time commitment, kind of the uncomfortableness of trying something new, and student reluctance to share, a bit challenging. And students also noted those things, but they also said that they had some concerns about working with a group and needing just a little more structure from their instructors. And our task force noted the need to send assignments back sometimes for revision because faculty had submitted them without including that all-important public-facing option. And so we definitely had that opportunity to discuss with faculty how that would look and the need to make sure that we include that as part of the renewable assignment. And we also want to make sure that we have the ability to share our results. So we're going to try to do IRB in the future for all of these surveys. And also, we're going to need to make sure to keep this material up to date and to check in with the OEN with every iteration to make sure that there's updated content. Okay, last slide. So finally, some takeaways and best practices. I would suggest that you model the behavior that you want to see your faculty adopt when they're doing open pedagogy with their students. So things like being open, creating open resources, being clear about expectations, scaffolding, holding your students accountable for the assignment requirements, and then providing safe space for discussion. And then also to make sure that your faculty are aware of the time commitment and the potential for challenges. So I think going forward in our next iteration, we'll spend some time talking through some of those challenges with faculty participants and just making sure that they are aware of what they're getting into. And of course, recognize and incentivize if you can. And finally, we've mentioned this before, but leverage existing resources such as what the OEN offers, and build on your own resources and make sure to share what you're doing with others. that's all for me. Thanks, everyone. I noticed
so
some
much,
questions in
Amanda.
the chat.
Yeah, there are some questions in the chat. I'm actually going to go ahead and stop sharing since this is our wrap up anyway. But yeah, there were some questions about whether you would share the student assessment questions.
Yes, I can do that. Let me grab that link.
Awesome, thank you. And then also a logistical question, were faculty already using Slack? You mentioned there wasn't as much engagement through that chat. I'm wondering whether that was already a tool they were using.
I can't say for certain. We invited them to our Slack channel and gave them the prompts. But if they were already using it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and Melissa, thanks for that comment in the chat too. That you really appreciate the emphasis that we model what we advocate, and I think that's such a key piece of the learning circle. And whether it's run in the more synchronous way or the asynchronous process for it. And then looks like we do have another question.
Yes. So did you notice adjunct instructors or contract instructors, did they adopt renewable assignments or open assignments? Because their contract conditions are different, Yes, you did mention you give $400 grant, and was that enough compensation for their time?
We did have several adjunct professors sign up. I would have to look at our numbers to see who didn't finish to answer that question of whether or not the incentive was enough. David, how about you? Did you have a lot of contract and adjunct participation?
Yeah, we always have a mix, to be honest, but that's actually something that we look for because as well as desiring faculty from different disciplines, we also quite like to include faculties in the makeup of the group at different stages of career and things along those lines. So yeah, we usually will see applications, proposals from adjuncts as well.
Thank you so much for that question. And there's another one that came in through the chat. You both mentioned that time commitments were an issue. Is the program too much for the everyday fact?
Yeah, good question. I think, well, each program is different. So I mean, I've been part of quite intensive programs that meet every week for 12 weeks, and then I've been part of programs that are a little bit more spaced out. My sense from having gone through those programs is that faculty prefer a little bit of time to reflect and particularly work on the deliverable. So Open Pedagogy Pit Stop that I mentioned, for example, we actually build in lab times. So they'll come in and work on their projects with the libraries and some IDs and sort of things like that. But it's drop in and it's more informal and so on. I find that helps. After going through a few of those intensive programs, is probably something I would look to avoid moving forwards. Not to say that it can't work, but generally speaking, yeah, time commitment is always going to be an issue with faculty. So if we can design programs that's gonna speak to that and acknowledge that everyone is busy, but also everybody wants to be better educators, right? So if we can design programs that can speak to that, that's really the way forward.
And I could just say that our program was designed intentionally to be asynchronous and to be less of a time commitment than the traditional learning circle. So that's kind of why we went the route of having folks review things on their own and then participate in the discussion space. I agree with some of the comments here about potentially just having one more place to look. So I would be all ears if you have other suggestions for places to encourage faculty discussion that don't require them to go to a new space and also have like a good sort of threading capability to them that wouldn't be, again, something else that they have to sign up for.
Any final thoughts or questions for David or Amanda?
I just have one question, if I may say.
course.
Timing, David, you mentioned Friday afternoons timing. Was this done when the class had already started, so they could implement it immediately? What was the timing like? When was the training offered? January, which month? Was it at the beginning of the semester? So they knew which courses they were teaching and they could immediately implement. Because you had all the surveys ready. Like, it's so excellent, the work you're doing. Timing is what I'm interested in learning more about.
No, thank you. And I will say with timing that unfortunately there's not that one time that works for everybody, and I think that's probably stating the obvious here. We've tried all different types of timing. So the last program that we ran started in the spring, and usually a few weeks into the semester, starting at the beginning of the semester, hasn't worked very well because it's such a busy period for instructors that you want to give them a little bit of space to sort of overcome that initial hurdle of getting the course off the ground prior to sort of beginning a program. But again, if you can do a more like a smaller learning circle that can begin midway through a semester. The only one that we've never really taken on is during the summer period. And that's just generally what we hear from faculty, is that that's a space where number one, a lot of faculty are still teaching in the summer, but a lot of the faculty will be doing research, or they'll be taking some well-deserved time out with family. That one, scheduling wise, time commitment wise, can be a little bit more challenging that we find. But yeah, I wish I had like that perfect answer to say everybody should do it on this day at this time. There is a little bit of piloting and figuring it out sort of on the go, as it were,
And I will say this question has also come up in our open pedagogy community of practice before too, just kind of trying to poll the audience of when has been a really good time for offering these types of sessions or programs. But yeah, I think to David's point, it's sort of try and guess and see which one ends up working out the best. But I wanted to thank David and Amanda for sharing their expertise with us and giving us these perspectives from the institutional view and the consortial view, a synchronous view, an asynchronous view. It's been really helpful to have these different key takeaways that you've both come up with. And we really appreciate you sharing your time with us today. And thank you all for being here with us today and for your great questions and chat. And if you'd like to continue this discussion, we have the community conversation happening at 2 o'clock Central that I just put in the chat as well. And then we also have the debrief session this afternoon at 3:15. And this has been recorded, and we will post the slides, the recording, the chat transcripts, all of that later on. Thanks again to all of you. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.